John Warnock Hinckley Jr., the man who shot President Ronald Reagan in March 1981, was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and was subsequently granted unsupervised visits with his family. Had Reagan died, then Vice President George H.W. Bush would have succeeded him to the presidency. A copy of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye was found in Hinckley's hotel room. Hinckley's father, John Hinckley Sr., was the president of the Denver-based Vanderbilt Energy Corporation. Beginning in 1976, he served as the president and as a member of the board of directors of the World Vision International Christian Missionary Charity Organization. It has been alleged that World Vision carried out assassin recruiting of communist dissidents for the Central Intelligence Agency. John Hinckley Sr.'s son Scott served as the vice president of Vanderbilt Energy. From 1974 to 1980, Scott Hinckley lived in Lubbock, Texas, at the same time that George H.W. Bush's son Neil lived there. Scott Hinckley had planned to dine at Neil Bush's Denver home on the night of the attempt on Reagan's life by Hinckley's brother John. 3.5 months prior to the shooting of Reagan, Mark David Chapman shot John Lennon to death outside his residence at the Dakota Building in New York City. Chapman's father, David Curtis Chapman, had served as a staff sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. It has been alleged that in 1975, the same year that the Vietnam War ended, Mark David Chapman worked for World Vision International at a refugee camp in Laos, a neighboring country of Vietnam. That Chapman has also done similar work in Lebanon, a neighbor of the state of Israel, and Arkansas. Chapman once shook hands with President Gerald Ford. Chapman shot John Lennon, who had claimed to be aware that his phone was being tapped by the FBI in the early 1970s, on December 8, 1980, a month after the 1980 presidential election, and 6 weeks prior to the inauguration of President Reagan and Vice President George H.W. Bush. After Lennon was shot, while waiting for the police to arrive, Chapman read J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, the same book found in the hotel room of Reagan's would-be assassin several months later. Working as a doorman at the Dakota Building the night John Lennon died was Jose Perdomo, an anti-Castro exile from Cuba. It has been alleged that Perdomo worked for the CIA as early as 1961, and even that he participated in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion. It has also been alleged that the codename for the Bay of Pigs invasion was Operation Zapata, which shared a word in common with Bush's oil company Zapata Offshore Company, and that the two Navy ships which were used for the invasion were renamed Houston and Barbara, the name of Bush's residence and the first name of his wife. George H.W. Bush and the Zapata Company have been alleged to have cooperated with the CIA as early as the late 1950s, and 2 FBI memoranda have been alleged to constitute evidence that such cooperation took place. Before Bush began serving as the director of the CIA from 1976 to 1977, he testified to Congress that he had never before worked for the agency. On November 22, 1963, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. George H.W. Bush was president in Dallas that day, but later claimed to have forgotten that fact. In the month following the assassination, several FBI memoranda pertaining to Kennedy's death were transmitted to a Mr. George H.W. Bush, president of the Zapata Offshore Drilling Company, Houston, Texas, and to a George Bush of the C.I.A. Bush has claimed not to be that George Bush. From 1995 to 2000, George W. Bush served as the governor of Texas. During this time, 152 inmates in Texas prisons were put to death. The only person Bush ever pardoned from death row was a bestialist and a serial killer named Henry Lee Lucas. Lucas, who was indicted for nearly 200 counts of murder, was the subject of the 1986 film Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. Lucas claimed to have been part of the Hand of Death, a cannibalistic satanic cult, and to have delivered poison to cult leader Jim Jones. Jones, who died in Guyana in 1978, was the leader of the People's Temple in Jonestown, Guyana. It has been alleged that Jones was an operative for the CIA, that the death of 1,109 people in Jonestown was the result of a government mind control experiment, and that World Vision International was involved. It has also been alleged that, following the massacre, World Vision developed a scheme to repopulate Jonestown with CIA-linked mercenaries from Laos, the neighboring country of Vietnam, where Mark David Chapman allegedly worked at a World Vision-sponsored refugee camp just 3 years before the Jonestown massacre. President Obama promised to cut the approximately $300 million in federal funding which World Vision, which today helps provide livestock to third world families, receives annually, but he has thus far failed to do so.